What is up, everybody? Back again with another video. And today I want to talk about the art of count stamping. Now, it's a weird term, but I'm using it. Hopefully at the end of this video, you kind of understand where I'm coming from. And I had to pull up some slides because this is, I would say, not really tricky, but it's good to kind of structure the video a little bit versus me freestyling like I always do. So looking at these questions, these are questions that I, as a HubSpot consultant, get all the time, right? Where clients ask me to help them gain insights on how many times a certain situation happened or occurred, right? How many companies are associated with a contact? Because based on that data, you want to run a cleanup, for example. How many disqualified leads are associated with a contact, so I can permanently disqualify everybody who has more than 5 disqualified leads associated to them, right? And for us to be able to do that, we need that data stored inside HubSpot. And when you look at the how many aspect, it's really simple in a sense that you need a number, right? We need the number of companies that are associated, the number of sales emails that are opened, the number of disqualified leads. And you get a pretty good set of properties already out of the box from HubSpot that kind of help you in that way, right? If I go to the property settings here and I simply search for number, you can see that HubSpot also understands that, hey, that kind of data is really valuable, right? Number of page views, number of sequences, number of sessions, unique forms submitted. And because this data is stored in properties, now I can use that within other aspects of HubSpot. I can use this to filter my contacts. I can use this for list building. I can use this in reports. I can use this for lead scoring. I can use this in workflows. But we need that information stored inside HubSpot. So every time I get a request and people ask me like how many times did something happen, I immediately think of transferring that event into a count property, right? Every time that event happens, I want it stored inside that property so I can use that for segmentation. And as we saw, HubSpot will provide you with a good starting set, I'd say, but it does not really tackle any of these use cases, right? Because how many times did a contact open up a sales email? I don't have a property like that, right? I don't have it. But it's really easy to set up actually to create your own count properties. Only thing you really need to do is, there it is, count stamping. If you are able to build a workflow that simply triggers each time that event or situation happens, you can use the workflow action listed at the bottom here, where we simply increase that property by 1. So if we take this use case here, how many times did a contact open up a sales email? It's really easy to set up. We need to create a custom property, which is called, let's see here, quickly search for sales. This one right here, number of sales emails. As you see, it's a number, unformatted. It's not really that exciting. Only thing I did here was no decimals, because you can't really have a zero point 0.5 as a open sales email. And then once you have that set up, that property, make sure the default value is set to 0, because if the property is empty, which they are by default, the workflow will not necessarily work. And the workflow itself is really, really easy, because like I said, it's kind of the same process. You need to keep in mind where you want to trigger the workflow every time that situation is happening. So in this use case, I'm looking at the recent sales email open, the open date, and this property will change every time someone opens up a sales email. So to me, that's a perfect trigger. Every time someone opens up the email, they get enrolled in the workflow. As you see, re-enrollment is on, and then we simply +1 that property we just created. So now this workflow gets triggered every time a sales email gets opened, and you have a dedicated property that shows you how many times a contact has opened up a sales email. And again, because it's a property, you can now use that property for further segmentation, list building, whatever. And just to showcase here, I've opened it 2 times on December 6th, and the property is automatically populated via the workflow. Again, make sure default value is set to 0. You can do it with a workflow, but for this use case, I've done it manually. But make sure you set it to 0, else the workflow will not work. And now we have a dedicated property. So every time someone asks you to get data based on, how many times certain situations happened, these count properties can really help you gain that additional insight. And as you see, the workflow is really easy. You just have to really think about what trigger you want to use to make sure that, the workflow enrolls each and every time that event or that situation is happening. And there are definitely different ways to go about this. You can use custom objects, you can use custom events, even in some ways, I'd say. But to me, this is really easy. As you see, the only thing we really need is one custom property, set it to 0, and then build a workflow. And the workflow is really easy as well. So it's kind of light in workload as well, versus maybe custom objects, custom events, whatever. So that's why I oftentimes use this approach to quickly populate some key properties that really give you additional information. Now, if you're working with associated objects, you don't even need a workflow. Let me quickly search for number of, because you can also leverage the rollup property. Here's one I created. Let's say I want to create a property that shows me the number of associated tickets of a contact. Out of the box, we don't necessarily have that, right? And maybe I want to filter uh, based on that number, and send them or not send them an NPS survey, for example, right? So you need the number as a criteria. So what you can do is you can simply create a rollup property, select the count type, and then use a property that you know for a fact is always filled in. So in this case, I'm using create date, because I know for a fact that create date is never empty. At least I've never seen a ticket without a create date created. So that really helps. And once you've set that up, quickly showcase here. If I would now add a ticket, as you see, I'm having 4 tickets associated to this contact, 4 listed in the property. Now, if I add a 5th one, of course, it will take some time. It's not, instantly that the property is updated, but it should work within a couple of seconds, right? Let's see. Sometimes it really takes like a minute or so. But yeah, so essentially, again, just to quickly recap here, if you ever get the question of how many times, how many X did situation XYZ occur, most of the time you can tackle this with a simple workflow that I just showcased if you make sure that it counts every time that situation is happening. And to me, it's kind of a staple of a HubSpot admin. If you have that thought process of making the transition, of knowing when to take that step, that really, helps you gain additional insights within the portal. So yeah, I wanted to share. Hopefully it was helpful. And just to verify here, so you don't think I am crazy, it will take some time, unfortunately. So maybe a workflow is even quicker, but the roll-up property should definitely work here as well. It just takes some time. Just want to verify, else I'm getting all the angry comments like, hey, you are providing false information. That's definitely not my intention here. So we're gonna wait a couple of seconds. So again, to me, this is a solution I oftentimes use when people have, questions like this. And if you combine that with date stamping versus count stamping, you have a really powerful approach in getting relevant data inside your portal, right? Because count stamping essentially gives you insights in how many times something happened, and date stamping will give you insights in when something actually happened. And the process is essentially the same. Instead of a count property, you'll use a date property, which you'll set once a specific event is happening. And then, based on that date, you can further use that date property to build reports, workflows, lists, segmentation, filters, whatever. So these two properties and these two, relevant workflow actions are kind of a staple of any good HubSpot admin, I would say. So final refresh. Yes, there it is. So it's really easy to gain additional insights with minimal workload. And I'm a big fan of these little optimizations where I don't really have to dive deep or, spend a lot of time to gain relevant data or put relevant data in HubSpot. So yeah, I wanted to share. Let me know what you think. And as always, happy HubSpotting.